This video segment is going to focus on how to factor a difference of squares. And what a difference of squares means is that you have two terms, and for example an x squared term and a 25, and both of those terms are what are called perfect squares. And what perfect squares mean is that when you take the square root of each of those terms, you end up with a whole number. You'll also notice that there is a minus sign in between these two perfect squares, hence the difference of squares. And you will also notice that there is no middle x term that you would typically have in standard form. So there are just the two terms, and in order to factor those two terms, what you do is you take the square root. You find the square root of each of those terms. So the square root of x squared is an x, and the square root of 25 is 5. And by factoring, what you do is in each of the brackets that you're going to create, you put the square roots of each of the terms into the bracket. The x's and the 5's go into each bracket. Now, in one of the brackets you will have a plus, and in the other you will have a minus. And if you were to do expanding of these two binomials, doing your rainbow math, you would take x times x, and you'd get an x squared. And x times a minus 5 is a minus 5x. And now the 5 times an x is a plus 5x. And a positive 5 times a negative 5 is a minus 25. When you simplify, you will add those two terms together, and you end up with a negative 5 plus 5 is 0. So there are no x terms, and you're left with a minus 25. And that is your expression that you began with in the first place. So factoring is the opposite operation to binomial multiplication. And when you're factoring a difference of squares, remember to take the square root of each term and put it into the brackets. So for another example, if you have x squared minus 36, the square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 36 is 6. So what you end up with in the brackets when you factor is the x and the 6, and in one bracket you will add, and in the other you subtract. And again, if you were to expand this, you end up with x squared minus 6x plus 6x minus 36. And these two terms add to 0, and you're left with x squared minus 36, which is the original expression.